When distance settles between two souls, one often imagines that silence is a void, a cold and empty space where nothing lives. Yet silence is not a void, it is a mirror. It reflects what each person carries within. The avoidant, in their retreat, often believes that silence will prove something, that it will validate their control, their self-sufficiency, their belief that they do not need what they have lost. But time, as it always does, unfolds the truth quietly, and the truth does not bend to pride. The truth reveals that silence does not confirm strength, it exposes it. It shows whether the peace they thought they wanted is genuine or just fear dressed in composure. When one who is avoidant withdraws, they do not vanish because they feel nothing. They vanish because feeling threatens the image they hold of themselves. To need, to miss, to care too much, these are vulnerabilities that disturb their illusion of calm. So they hide behind distance, hoping that no contact will erase the discomfort, that silence will make them the victor of emotional restraint. Yet beneath that silence lies an unspoken expectation that you will break it, that you will reach out first, that your longing will prove them right, that your voice will return to reassure them of their worth, to confirm that even in their withdrawal, they remain desired. This is their hidden comfort, the expectation that silence will pull you closer, even as they pretend to push you away. But the universe has its quiet laws, and one of them is that detachment has power only when it is pure. If your silence is born from peace, not pride, it will shift the balance in ways that surprise both of you. For the avoidant expects your absence to echo with your craving. They expect to feel your pursuit in every unseen message, every imagined word. They expect you to reach out, because that is the pattern they have always known. The pattern where one withdraws and the other chases. The pattern that feeds their sense of control. But when you choose not to play that game, when you let silence be, not as a weapon but as acceptance, something unexpected occurs. The avoidant begins to hear the silence they created, and for the first time, it does not answer back. What surprises them is not your silence itself. It is your peace within it. They expected you to wait, to ache, to react. They did not expect you to heal. They did not expect you to grow comfortable in your own stillness. They did not expect you to stop orbiting around their moods. The avoidant expects control, and silence without reaction removes it from them. For when you no longer fight to be heard, the noise in their mind grows louder. The silence they sought for peace now becomes their teacher. It begins to whisper truths they tried to ignore. It tells them that control cannot replace connection, that distance cannot erase care, that avoidance cannot prevent reflection. There is a kind of courage in letting go without bitterness, and it confuses those who use distance as defense. Because avoidance thrives on emotional imbalance, it feeds on the reaction it provokes. When you refuse to offer that, when you hold your ground with serenity, you do not punish them, you free yourself. But in freeing yourself, you also confront them with what they fear most, the reality that they are not as detached as they believe. For the avoidant often imagines that they can walk away from attachment unscarred. They think time will make them forget, that solitude will cleanse them of feeling. Yet true solitude does not erase, it reveals. It shows them that their independence was never the same as inner peace. When you enter no contact with quiet dignity, you allow natural order to do what words could never do. You stop trying to persuade, to explain, to prove. You return responsibility for their emotions back to them. That is the silent wisdom of detachment. It allows others to meet themselves. The avoidant begins to realize that their comfort depended not on their strength, but on your presence. They realize that your patience was not weakness, it was grace, that your attempts to understand were not desperation, but compassion. And when that compassion no longer reaches them, they feel the weight of their own distance. The silence they believed would bring peace now mirrors the void inside them. Avoidants secretly expect that you will break no contact first, not because they need to hear from you, but because that act restores their illusion of control. It reassures them that even in withdrawal, they remain desired. It confirms that they still matter, without having to risk vulnerability themselves. They want the reward of connection without the cost of openness. But when that expectation is unmet, when you choose silence not out of pride but acceptance, it confronts them with an unexpected truth, that your world continues without them, that your peace no longer depends on their validation, that they are not as central to your existence as they once imagined. And that realization unsettles them deeply, for it breaks the narrative of their control. Time, in silence, becomes the greatest revealer. The avoidant expects you to crumble, but time shows them that endurance is not always noisy. It shows them that patience is not weakness, and that detachment, when born of understanding, is stronger than any wall built from avoidance. The longer silence stretches, the more they begin to question their assumptions. They start to wonder why you have not reached out, whether you have moved on, whether they misjudged your attachment. And with that doubt comes reflection, something they have long resisted. Silence forces them to sit with what they have avoided, their own contribution, their own fears, their own emotional poverty. The surprise for them is not the end of communication, it is the transformation that follows. They expected distance to diminish your presence, yet it deepens it. It echoes louder in their quiet moments, because it is not filled with chasing, pleading, or anger. It is filled with absence that has meaning. It is the kind of absence that commands respect, the kind that says, "I wish you well, but I no longer need to prove it." Such silence carries dignity, and dignity is unforgettable. The avoidant may not admit it, but they begin to remember you not through what you said, but through what you no longer need to say. They begin to see strength where they once saw dependency. They begin to feel respect where they once expected pursuit. Many confuse no contact with manipulation, but true silence is not a tactic. It is truth. It is the understanding that some lessons cannot be taught through words. That growth often comes through the space we allow, not the arguments we win. The avoidant learns, though slowly, that you cannot outrun connection forever. That to care is not weakness. That to depend is not defeat. That to face oneself is the only way to heal. And as they learn this, often in the solitude they once celebrated, they start to feel what they never expected: regret. The kind that does not demand reconciliation, but reflection. The kind that whispers, not shouts. The kind that arrives when it's already too late. The Stoic path teaches not to control others, but to control the self. And silence is a profound teacher of that. It teaches you where your peace truly lies. Within, not in the reaction of another. It shows you that detachment is not indifference, but wisdom. That walking away does not mean giving up, but choosing serenity over struggle. When you hold your silence with composure, you stop feeding the cycle of avoidance and pursuit. You stop being a participant in someone else's defense mechanism. And the moment you do, you restore balance. You take back your energy. You begin to live for truth, not for attention. The avoidant, however, measures worth through attention. They cannot understand the silence of peace, only the silence of punishment. When yours is peaceful, it confuses them. It makes them question whether they misread your intentions, your emotions, your depth. They begin to re-evaluate their choices. They start to realize that avoidance protected them from pain, but also from connection. That the same wall that kept them safe also kept them alone. They see, too late perhaps, that silence can be both shield and mirror, and what it reflects is not your weakness, but their fear. If you look deeper, you will see that what they truly expect during no contact is not indifference, but validation. They expect you to validate their importance, to confirm that their retreat still holds power. But when silence becomes your peace, that validation never comes. And that absence of validation becomes the very thing that teaches them. It shows them the cost of emotional distance, the weight of pride, the emptiness of avoidance. In that realization, the avoidant begins to feel what they have long denied longing, not just for you, but for the connection they abandoned to protect their illusion of strength. Silence reveals everything that noise conceals. It shows you who truly values presence and who values power. It shows who can face themselves and who hides behind distraction. It exposes the truth of attachment, not through words, but through absence. The avoidant learns, often the hard way, that peace cannot come from running. It must come from understanding. And when they finally understand, they often find that the one who once sought them has found peace elsewhere. That silence, once their weapon, became your freedom. That the game they thought they controlled ended not in victory, but in awakening. Yours, not theirs. True silence does not seek to punish. It seeks to heal. It teaches that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let the other person meet their own emptiness. It reminds you that compassion does not require contact, and closure does not require conversation. The avoidant may not say it, but they feel it. They sense the shift. The surprise for them is that no contact did not make you smaller, it made you whole. It did not weaken your connection to life, it deepened it. It did not prove their strength, it revealed their fragility. For avoidance is not strength, it is fear disguised as control. And silence strips away the disguise. The truth is, no one escapes the mirror of silence. It reflects both the seeker and the avoider. It tests who can sit with themselves without distraction. It rewards the one who learns to listen, not to others, but to their own inner calm. When you practice silence not as strategy but as state, you embody something unshakable. You no longer wait for understanding. You become understanding itself, and that, more than anything, surprises the avoidant. For in their world, love has always meant pursuit, but you, in your stillness, show that love can also mean release. That presence can exist even in absence. That peace can stand where chaos once ruled. They may return, moved by curiosity, by nostalgia, by regret. They may seek to test the silence, to see if the peace you've found is real. But by then, the transformation within you has already occurred. You no longer seek from them what they cannot give. You see them not with longing, but with clarity. You recognize their distance as their lesson, not your loss. And that recognition is the final surprise for both of you, because when you no longer react to avoidance, you transcend it. You step into a place where connection is no longer about need, but about truth, and truth once seen can never be unseen. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the highest form of it. It speaks what words cannot. It teaches what explanations fail to convey. It reminds both you and the avoidant that peace does not come from control, but from acceptance. And in that understanding, You find the strength to let life unfold as it must. You no longer chase what runs nor hold what resists. You simply remain still, calm, and aware, and the universe, in its quiet wisdom, always honors that. The silence between you and the avoidant does not simply separate two people, it reveals two states of being, one rooted in fear, the other seeking understanding. One runs from pain, the other sits with it, and in this difference lies the essence of transformation. For when you choose silence consciously, you are no longer reacting from emotion. You are acting from wisdom. You no longer ask, "Why did they pull away?" But instead, "Why did I hold on to something that needed distance to reveal its truth?" This is how the silence begins to cleanse, not destroy. Avoidants secretly expect that your silence will be temporary. They imagine that after a while, you will miss them enough to break it. That your emotions will betray your logic, and that your longing will overpower your self-control. But when it doesn't happen, confusion begins to take root in them. Their confidence wavers. The certainty that you depended on their attention fades. They begin to sense something unfamiliar, a quiet void that their ego cannot fill. It is then that the silence begins to whisper truths they tried to avoid hearing. They start to question what it was in them that drove connection away. They start to remember the warmth that their detachment once dismissed. Every person who distances themselves believes they can manage the consequences of that distance. They think that silence will protect them, that isolation will bring clarity. But silence is a double-edged mirror. It shows not only freedom, but also loneliness. And when the initial comfort of control fades, the reflection left behind is raw. The avoidant begins to feel the cost of their avoidance, not immediately, but gradually, like a slow tide reclaiming the shore. They remember moments not with regret, but with an ache they cannot name. Because they expected your silence to be filled with longing, not peace. They expected it to hurt you more than it healed you. The surprise for them is not that you stayed silent, but that your silence transformed you. They see that you are no longer waiting for them to return. You no longer need the closure they once withheld. You have found meaning not in their response, but in your stillness. And this unsettles them, for avoidance loses its power when it no longer controls another's emotions. The dynamic they relied upon, withdrawal and chase, coldness and pursuit, no longer exists. What remains is truth, and truth is something the avoidant cannot manipulate. It stands calm, unwavering, and free. The longer silence lasts, the more it becomes a mirror for both. You begin to understand that you were never waiting for them. You were waiting for yourself, waiting to see your own strength, your own resilience, your own worth, independent of their attention. You realize that silence is not rejection, it is refinement. It shapes your mind into clarity and your heart into peace. You stop seeing the avoidant as the source of your pain and start seeing them as a mirror reflecting the parts of you that sought external validation. In that understanding, forgiveness arises, not necessarily toward them, but toward yourself for once mistaking attachment for love. The avoidant, too, begins to feel something unfamiliar. They find that silence, once a comfort, becomes restless. They start to remember the peace your presence brought, even if they once resisted it. They start to understand that care without control is rare, that patience without demand is strength, not weakness. They replay moments, not out of desire, but out of curiosity. How could someone stay calm without closure? How could someone choose peace when they offered confusion? It is in that questioning that the avoidant meets their own mirror. the reflection of emotional avoidance itself. Avoidance is not the absence of emotion, it is fear's disguise. It is the attempt to protect oneself from pain by never stepping fully into intimacy. But silence exposes that fear. When the person they thought would always reach out no longer does, when the energy they relied on to feel desired disappears, they confront their own emptiness. They realize that avoidance did not protect them from pain. It only delayed it. And in that delay, it grew deeper, quieter, harder to name. The surprise for them is that silence becomes their own teacher, just as it became yours. To live with awareness is to understand that we cannot control how others respond to life, only how we do. The avoidant may expect, assume, even hope that your silence is a strategy to bring them back. But when your silence holds no agenda, it becomes something divine. It becomes an act of letting the universe decide what belongs to you and what was only passing through. You begin to move beyond the realm of waiting and into the realm of being. And that, more than anything, is what they never expected, to be forgotten not out of anger, but out of peace. It is often said that silence can be loud, but it can also be healing. It teaches you to listen differently. You begin to hear your own intuition more clearly. You begin to see where your energy once leaked through need, where your compassion was mistaken for permission, and where your love was stretched thin, trying to reach someone not ready to receive it. Silence closes the gap between illusion and truth. It makes you realize that you never lost them. You lost the illusion of what they were meant to be for you. And in that realization, you regain yourself. The avoidant, meanwhile, struggles with what silence reflects. They start to sense time moving differently. Days that once felt peaceful now feel empty. The distance they created begins to feel heavy. They scroll through memories they once ignored, messages they once left unanswered, and wonder if they misunderstood the value of what they had. They remember your patience and start to see it not as weakness, but as maturity. They remember your calm, and it reminds them of stability they could not match. They remember your understanding and realize it came from depth, not need. The surprise is that they begin to respect what they once dismissed. The beauty of silence is that it holds both sides accountable. It does not punish, it reveals. For you, it reveals resilience. For them, it reveals avoidance. For both, it reveals truth. And in that truth lies a deeper lesson. That love without understanding becomes attachment, and attachment without awareness becomes suffering. Silence burns away the unnecessary until only what is real remains. And what is real is never lost, it simply changes form. When you choose to stay silent, you are not abandoning anyone, you are choosing alignment. You are aligning with peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, growth over repetition. You understand that not every connection is meant to be held. Some are meant to awaken. The avoidant came into your life not to complete you, but to reveal the parts of you that needed to be whole. They taught you the power of detachment, though not through their wisdom, but through their absence. And while they expected you to chase, you learned instead to breathe. You learned that true power lies not in being pursued or pursuing, but in being present with yourself. The avoidant secretly expects time to erase the connection, but it does not. Time does not erase, it refines. It softens the sharp edges of emotion until understanding emerges. They begin to realize that silence is not indifference. It is acceptance. And acceptance is something they have never known. They start to feel what they once denied, that connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. The same courage they lacked when they pulled away is now the one they need to face the silence. And sometimes, by the time they find it, the moment has already passed. But your silence was never about revenge. It was about evolution. It was about returning to your natural state, a state where your peace does not depend on someone else's fear. It was about realizing that you cannot heal someone who refuses to face themselves. It was about learning that distance can be a sanctuary when used with wisdom. The avoidant may never say it, but they will feel it, the quiet power of your stillness, the invisible lesson in your detachment, the unexpected peace that their distance gave you. And perhaps that is the final irony. The one who withdrew to protect themselves ends up awakening through the silence of the one they left behind. You begin to see that every ending is also a mirror of your own readiness. You were not meant to teach them through words, but through example. You were meant to show that peace is not born from control, but from surrender. That strength is not found in holding on, but in letting go with grace. And though the avoidant may return, curious or remorseful, you will have already crossed the threshold of needing their understanding. You will see them not as the one who hurt you, but as the one who helped you meet yourself. That is the highest form of closure, when you no longer need an apology to be free. The silence between two souls has its own language. It speaks of endings that become beginnings, of lessons disguised as loss, of love that transforms instead of fades. The avoidant expected silence to weaken you. Instead, it revealed your strength. They expected time to make you chase. Instead, it made you whole. They expected absence to erase your care. Instead, it purified it. That is the great surprise of silence. It never punishes. It transforms. It teaches both the one who withdraws and the one who stays. It gives each what they need, not what they want. And in that, it restores balance to all things. The quiet truth is that those who fear closeness will always meet themselves in solitude. They will learn that distance cannot protect them from longing, that control cannot replace connection, that silence cannot erase emotion. The only way to heal is to face oneself completely, without defense or denial. And if your silence serves as the mirror that leads them there, then your role was sacred, even if unrecognized, because through your stillness, you allowed truth to do its quiet work. There comes a moment, long after no contact has begun, when both souls finally understand what the silence meant. It was never about pride. It was about clarity. It was never about punishment. It was about peace. It was never about ending. It was about becoming. The avoidant sees, perhaps for the first time, that love cannot coexist with fear, and you see that peace cannot coexist with attachment. Both learn, each in their own way, that silence was never empty. It was full of meaning. And that meaning, though born from distance, becomes the seed of wisdom that each must carry forward. In the end, silence teaches more than words ever could. It humbles the ego, calms the heart, and clears the mind. It shows who is ready for depth and who hides from it. It reveals that love without presence is only illusion, and presence without peace is only noise. The avoidant expected silence to serve them, but it served truth instead. It showed them that the person they pushed away was not weak, but wise. It reminded them that freedom without connection is emptiness, and that connection without peace is chaos. And it showed you that letting go does not mean losing. It means trusting that what is real never requires force. So let the silence remain. Let it do what it must. Let it teach what it was meant to teach. For silence is not the end. It is the beginning of awareness, and awareness is the foundation of all peace. And so the silence stretches beyond time, beyond expectation. Beyond the small games of ego and validation, it becomes something purer, a force that cleanses not only the bond that once existed, but the illusions that surrounded it. The avoidant, in their retreat, believed they could define the rules of connection. When to draw close, when to disappear, when to give affection, when to withhold it. They imagined that detachment gave them mastery, that their distance made them immune. Yet silence is the one terrain where control dissolves. It does not respond to tactics. It honors truth alone. And the truth always finds its way through stillness. For the one who embraces silence, not as strategy, but as surrender, discovers a power that the avoidant cannot comprehend. It is the power of presence without dependency. The quiet knowing that you are whole whether anyone returns or not. The calm that comes when you no longer need to prove your worth. You become like still water, reflective, undisturbed, unreactive. You stop trying to convince anyone of your value, because value does not need convincing. It reveals itself in time. The avoidant cannot predict this transformation, for their mind is shaped by fear. Fear of engulfment, fear of rejection, fear of losing control. They expect others to orbit around their silence as though it were gravity itself. Yet when you refuse to orbit, when you stand still, when you no longer bend to the rhythm of their retreat, the gravity shifts. It is they who begin to feel the pull. It is they who begin to wonder. The silence, once their comfort, now becomes the echo of their own avoidance. It speaks not of your absence, but of their resistance. They begin to remember the subtle things, the steadiness of your energy, the patience in your tone, the way your presence softened the harshness of their solitude. These memories surface unbidden, for silence has a way of stirring what was buried. And though they may not reach out, though they may pretend indifference, something changes within them. They begin to understand that what they once dismissed as attachment was actually understanding, that what they once resisted was not suffocation, but sincerity. They begin to see that real connection does not take freedom away, it gives it form. Yet do not wait for this realization to appear, for it may never arrive in words. The avoidance lessons come slowly, and not all are meant to return what they learn. Your role is not to stand by the door, hoping for recognition. It is to walk through it into your own peace. The wisdom of silence lies in its self-containment. You do not hold it to elicit a reaction. You hold it because it reflects who you have become. You no longer seek to explain yourself to those who fear understanding. You no longer try to heal those who are not ready to face their wounds. You stand quietly in the truth that what is meant to stay will never need to be chased. The avoidant expects that silence will prove their independence, but it instead reveals their isolation. They expect distance to cleanse their mind, but it only magnifies their unrest. They expect that time will fade the bond, but it only clarifies what was genuine. For the nature of truth is to intensify in absence. What is false vanishes, what is real endures. That endurance, quiet and steady, becomes your peace. In your stillness, you come to see that no contact is not punishment, it is purification. It strips away the layers of projection, of illusion, of emotional dependency. You begin to see not just them clearly, but yourself. You see the part of you that once needed their validation, the part that tried to earn love through patience, the part that mistook effort for worth. And as you watch those patterns fade, you feel lighter. You no longer carry the burden of being understood by someone who could not even face themselves. The avoidant, meanwhile, finds that their solitude begins to whisper questions they avoided for years. They start to feel the dissonance between who they appear to be, and what they feel inside. They may still move through life with composure, but underneath, something shifts. A faint sense of loss, of recognition, of what they could not hold when it was offered. They begin to realize that they did not lose because someone left. They lost because they could not stay present. And that realization, quiet and private, is the very lesson that silence delivers. You, too, change. You begin to understand that peace is not something others give you. It is something you cultivate in the soil of acceptance. You stop fighting with what has already happened. You stop bargaining with the past. You stop needing answers to questions that silence has already resolved. And as you do, the world around you begins to mirror that inner calm. People who vibrate with confusion drift away. Those who honor stillness draw nearer. The outer world becomes a reflection of your inner one. The avoidant may return, subtly, cautiously. They may test the silence with a message, a memory, a brief hello disguised as indifference. But you will feel the difference immediately. The silence has reshaped you. Their words no longer stir what they once did. You see through them, not with judgment, but with clarity. You understand that their return is not always a sign of growth. Sometimes it is a search for comfort. And because you have found your comfort within, you no longer need to participate in their cycles. You can wish them well without re-entering the maze of avoidance. Silence teaches you boundaries in the purest way. It teaches you to discern between compassion and self-sacrifice, between love and attachment, between patience and waiting in vain. You begin to understand that love without self-respect is not love but dependency. That empathy without limits becomes self-erasure, and so you build your peace upon balance, not on isolation, but on inner stability. You do not close your heart, you guard it with wisdom. The avoidant, over time, comes to understand something profound, that avoidance never truly protected them. It simply delayed the moment they would have to meet themselves. They see that the love they once rejected was not a threat to their freedom, but a reflection of their fear. They see that the person who remained calm in silence was not cold, but conscious. That peace is not apathy, but mastery of self, and that realization, though quiet, stays with them far longer than any argument, any chase, any confession ever could. It is then that silence completes its purpose. It has taught both souls what they needed, not what they wanted. It has revealed the truth beneath the noise. It has separated illusion from essence. And in doing so, it has restored the natural order of things. What was never meant to last fades without bitterness. What was true remains in the heart as understanding, not attachment. What was painful becomes wisdom. And so, the silence that began as a wall becomes a bridge to self-awareness, to healing, to freedom. You no longer see it as absence, but as presence of truth. You begin to move through life with lighter steps, gentler thoughts, clearer vision. You become untouchable not because you are distant, but because you are whole. The avoidant, too, will carry something from the silence, a memory, a lesson, a question that lingers. They may not voice it. They may not even fully understand it. But somewhere within, they will know that they met something rare. Someone who did not beg, did not fight, did not cling. Someone who let silence speak, and in doing so, taught them the quiet strength of acceptance. Thus, silence becomes the final teacher, the one neither expected but both needed. It completes the cycle, returning each to themselves. For in the end, all relationships are mirrors. The avoidant showed you where you sought validation. You showed them where they feared vulnerability. And silence, the space between, revealed the truth of both. When you can stand in that truth without resentment, without longing, without pride, you have reached the essence of peace. You no longer look back for closure. You no longer look forward for validation. You simply stand here, present, aware, free. That is the real surprise of silence. It does not change the other, it transforms you.